Because it was? Well, I'll talk to you later. Yeah, be good, be smart.
I need to remind you to keep the aisles clear, please, and I also need to remind you that this is being taped on C-SPAN, so be on your best behavior. My name is Alan Cooperman. I'm the senior editor for nonfiction at the Washington Post Book World. The Washington Post is a proud sponsor of the National Book Festival on the Mall. We're very pleased to be here today, and it's my great pleasure now to introduce what is surely one of the most successful collaborations in history writing and documentary filmmaking, Geoffrey Ward and Ken Burns. Ward and Burns have been working together for 17 years on documentary scripts and companion histories. 23 years. Mr. Ward has written the companion volumes to 4 of Mr. Burns' documentaries, including the Civil War and the latest sensation, The War, which, as you all know, began airing last Sunday on PBS. Like the documentary, the book tells the story of the war in large part through the eyes of ordinary soldiers and makes clear the crushing cost of the conflict. Please welcome Geoffrey Ward and Ken Burns.
Sorry. We'll improvise, something we do all the time. First of all, I just want to say on behalf of Jeff, but also Lynn Novick and Sarah Botstein. Lynn is the co-director and co-producer of the film. Sarah is the producer of the film. Just how blown away we are by being with you today. It's something so nice to see people who love books together in one place. I said to somebody earlier that I thought that the book was still the greatest mechanical invention on earth. And despite the fact that we all here have collaborated principally on film, we have to acknowledge, not just because we will be speaking about a companion book, but because this is the way we operate as filmmakers. Too often in the film community, the image is seen as the enemy of the word and vice versa. We do not subscribe to that. In the beginning is the word. I count among the greatest blessings of my life the association with this extraordinary writer and the chance to use words as well as pictures to tell the stories in the documentary. And then the icing on the cake is to be privileged to watch as Jeff takes our abbreviated text of a film script and expands it into this glorious standalone book. The word companion should be forever banished when Jeff takes up his pen. I was reminded of this a few moments earlier when we were asked to sign at the signing down the mall the textbook that is just the prose, the distilled words from our supposed coffee table picture book that is now taught in high schools and colleges around the country. The text that he was able to do is considered the sort of the beginning introduction to the Civil War. We hope that people will similarly realize what Jeff has done in the transformation of our script into a book. But Jeff and I are so awed by your presence here. We also see their microphones in the aisles, and so we wanted to, in many ways, get out of your way. You're Many of you are here because you're in the midst of watching our series. The 4 episodes have been shown already. Starting tomorrow night, PBS will continue the broadcast. Those of you with a little bit of extra time at the end of today, we're going to be down the mall at the World War II Memorial showing scenes from the episodes that are going to be shown Sunday and Monday and Tuesday night, the concluding episodes of the series, and hope you can join us there. There'll be some veterans that I'm sure you'll want to talk to as well. But I thought that each of us would just speak for a few moments about our end of things. And so I just talk a little bit about the film project and then turn it over to Jeff to speak a little bit more about the book and what's there, and then most of all, open it up to your questions. As you all know, PBS began broadcasting last Sunday, the 23rd, our 7-part 14.5-hour series on the American experience in the Second World War, entitled Simply the War. It came precisely 17 years to the moment after our series on the Civil War was first aired, and it is a little bit daunting to think that we have spent 17 years of our professional lives and the only thing we have to show for it is the removal of the word civil. That first series began with a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. He had been wounded 6 times during the struggle and would go on to serve his country once again as a Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He said, "We have shared the incommunicable experience of war. We have felt, we still feel, the passion of life at its top. In our youths, our hearts were touched with fire." Holmes was struggling to put into words what everyone who has faced combat knows in his or her gut. That paradoxically, when your life is most threatened, when violent death is possible at any moment, everything is vivified. Your experience of life heightened to a degree not felt in any other part of that life. We are, as human beings, drawn to that horrific experience of war because we find in it this essential continuing paradox that out of the worst of human behavior also comes sometimes the very best of human nature. And in that crucible of war, we find revealed to ourselves in incredibly horrible, terrible ways, not only the essential flaws of human nature, but sometimes the absolute heights to which it can aspire. Those who had participated in the Civil War, those combat veterans, said after the war, after they'd been in combat, that they had seen the elephant. That was the phrase that they used, this exotic phrase. I guess it was the most exotic thing they could think of, to see the elephant, to distinguish their experiences from all other experiences. They had been in combat, they had been fired at, they had fired at other human beings, they had seen the elephant. And for those of us who were engaged in trying to come to terms with those 4 years in our national life, where in order to become one, we tore ourselves in two, we felt that in some ways, in a pale version of it, we had seen the elephant. And we had almost collectively vowed that we would not take on the subject of war again. We like to think of ourselves as emotional archaeologists, uninterested in excavating the dry dates and facts and events of the past, but interested in getting at the very human dimension that makes things like war so crushingly personal. And we hope that in some ways we had, at a remove of 140, 150 years, been able to share with you all a sense of what it might have been like to be in that war. And so we spent most of the 1990s deflecting requests from our colleagues and friends and strangers that we take on this war or that war, usually the Second World War, usually from aging veterans or their families, anxious that their parents' long private dramas be finally shared with the world. Each turned down, cementing even further our desire not to go to war.